Welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over in-house sign approval workflows. I'm currently in the Inhouz Cloud tab. To get into Inhouse Sign, all I need to do is click on the Inhouse Sign menu item. So I get into the Inhouse Sign module. Now, what is an approval workflow? An approval workflow is just a way to add some type of validation to documents that are going out to your recipients, and basically, decide what documents go straight out or what documents need an extra stamp, an extra review or approval. And there are many validation types when it comes to in-house sign e-signature approvals, and we're going to get into everything in this video. So there are three ways you can configure approvals or an approval workflow. One will be a global approval workflow. This is basically going to govern every single document that is created. On a template level, you can configure an approval workflow, and this is going to be based on a template. And then in individual documents, which is probably the most least effective way to do it, you can also configure an approval workflow within a specific document, a one-off document. But the two we're going to look at today is going to be the global approval workflow, and then we're going to touch on the template. All right. So to get into the global approval workflow, all you need to do is click on global approval workflow in a sidebar here. So this workflow is going to govern every single created document. So to enable an approval workflow, all you need to do is toggle this on. You can basically set the required approval count. I'm going to set that to 1, which just means that for a document to be approved, there has to be at least one approval. So we're going to add workflow validations, and there are different validation types. So there's document data, payment amount, recipient email, sender's email, sender's country, and sender's permission. We're going to touch a few of these, but I'm just going to take a second to just go over each one. So documents data is going to validate the data in documents. So if there is a special keyword or there's a special field, perhaps in your documents there's a sales amount or there is a term or there's a duration, whatever the case may be, you can validate against that specific data field and set rules to where if there is a match, then that document goes for approval. The same with payment amount. So this factors in when a document has a payment attached to it. So you can basically set validations, like for example, if the payment amount on the document is greater than $500, it needs to be reviewed. We're going to touch on this specific one very shortly. Recipient email validates against the recipient's email. So if you have a special customer, a special client that you want to make sure that you review all documents going to that client, then you could basically configure a recipient email validation. Sender's email, let's say you were to bring on someone new, or perhaps there's someone that is maybe in training and you want to just monitor all the documents that they generate. You could basically configure this here. The sender's country, this is going to be, this comes in very handy if you're a multinational organization, and let's say you wanted to monitor documents that originate from a certain country, then you could basically configure this very easily. So we've gone over all of these, and of course things like document data, things like payment amounts, these can be configured, all of these can be configured on a global scope, but of course some of them, such as like a documents data, makes more sense to be configured on a template level. So when it comes to the approval workflow builder, which is this user interface that we see here, it's going to be the same in the templates. It's going to look the exact same. The only difference is that this right here configures it for the global at the global scope, whereas when you do it within the template, it's localized to that template's scope. All right, so let's just look at what it looks like with documents data. So for example, let's say we had a field that says first name. We could basically come here and say first name. And let's say we were trying to flag for John. All right. It's literally that simple. We have this thing called an operator that helps you with the validation. So it could be equals, not equals, greater than, no equals, less than or equals, in list, not in list. So if you had, let's say you wanted to track for a list of names, you can switch to a list, and I can say John, and I can say James. All right. Now, what if and this is a much more complex scenario. What if you had an object, a nested data structure, and let's say it was an address, and the object was an address, and maybe there's a city in here. You could basically say something like address.city, which is basically going to traverse through your data structure and get to the city, and then you could run a validation. I can say Houston, which is where I'm located at, and right there you've basically configured your documents data validation. Let's exit this and let's do another one. Let's say payment amount. Perfect. So let's say you wanted to validate all payments or all documents with payments over $100. Very easy to configure. If you, let's say, you wanted to do documents, maybe you had a specific type of documents, payments in mind, and maybe you were looking for a very, very unique number. And you can say, well, if it was 65,000, and if it's 77,000, I'm just making things up here. People have very unique use cases. But obviously, if this was the case, you might want to do this at the template level because you might be looking for these numbers in a specific template or in a specific type of document. All right, let's exit here. Let's just do one last one, which we're going to use. Let's say let's say we want to validate against the recipient's email. In this case, I'm just going to add my Yahoo. All right. So now, whenever documents go to this user, it has to go for approval. Then we're going to have to configure our approvers. Here I'm going to pick myself. Now there's something very cool that with the Inhouz Sign approval workflow builder, you can set sub validations. So let's just say we still had our payment amount validation and we were trying to validate contracts with payments above $100. So as a CEO, I might not want to see every single contract that goes out that is above $100 because perhaps we do very big deals. So I might say, well, I want to approve contracts that are above $5,000. All right. So you can add a sub validation, and this way it makes it to where you can have many approvers, and based on certain criteria, based on certain sub validations, only the specific targeted approver gets to review and approve a document. All right, so let me add a sub validation for recipient's email and just add my current email. All right, so if I did not have a sub validation, then I will get every single document that matches this recipient email validation type. But I've just gone ahead to show you that you can also add a sub validation, and in this case I have done so. I'm going to click on save, and here we are. We've created our global approval workflow. I'm going to jump into a proposal, a template called test proposal. Go into the settings, and in the approval workflow I'm going to toggle this on, and as you see it looks the exact same. So you can configure this at the template level, and every single document created from these templates will adopt this approval workflow. So now what happens when you have a global approval workflow and then you have an approval workflow on a template level, right? There is a meshing that happens. So if, let's say, there's a validation type at the global and at the local, right? The local will always supersede the global. But let's say you had a global workflow and a global validation, and then you had a different local validation, right? Then both will apply. So when the same exists on the global and local or template level, the template will always supersede the global. And when there is variances, then they're meshed together. I'm going to turn this off because we're not going to configure this at the template level. We're going to exit here, then we're going to go straight away to create a document. So we're going to say this is test proposal YY22, just a random name. We're going to use the templates. We're going to use our test proposal templates. Now, one very key important thing to note is that approval workflows only work in the production environment. And this is because we don't want people getting bombarded with a bunch of approval requests for documents that are not, for contracts that are not real. So you can configure these approval workflows, but they would only apply when an actual real contract is sent out. And that's when it's from the production environment. So recipients, I'm going to then select myself, and remember that we should be getting an approval request because of our validation. I'm going to turn off the security, and I am going to send. Okay, so it generates now our app. Now as you can see, our document is awaiting approval. If I jump into it, we can see that the status still says awaiting approval. Now I've received an email. That says Uchenna Wampa's in-house sign document requires your approval. And here it is. If I click on the link, it should take me to the Inhouz Cloud app, and I could basically go to the approval and approve said document. Alright, so I'm going to go to the approval request tab, and I can see that I can see the document that is waiting for my approval. So this will be different for everybody. So if you had multiple people in your account, multiple users in your account, they will see the documents that are there for them to approve. So I'm going to view this document. I can see my approval box over here. It says that there is one required approval, and it's currently pending. I can review the documents and just see that everything looks good, and I could just hit review. You can reject or you can approve. We're going to go ahead and approve this document. Okay, so as you can see, it's approved, and now it's sent. So our user has received the document, and they can of course go ahead and sign this document. All right, that's it for the approval workflow. You can configure it on the global level. You can configure it at the template level. When there is a mismatch, it's merged, and if there are the same validations on the global and on the template scope, then the template will always supersede the global. And finally, approvals only occur with live documents, so documents in the production environment. All right, that's it for this video. See you in the next one.